don't run my Facebook page. My team does that. They're checking the results and they can report that to me in Slack. So it's totally about discipline and an awareness of what an energy suck that can be. And the more we learn about ourselves, the more effective we can be. An easy win is to curtail your social media activity.
Welcome to Corporate Warrior, the podcast that brings you the best advice on how to improve your health, optimize performance, and maximize productivity. With your host, Lawrence Neal.
This podcast is brought to you by HitUni.com. HitUni.com are a provider of amazing online courses for high-intensity training qualifications. HitUni comes highly recommended by the best in the field, including Body by Science co-author Dr. Doug McGuff, Discover Strength CEO Luke Carlson, and trainer and founder of Bay.com, Drew Bay. It was founded by my friend, author, and longtime personal trainer Simon Shawcross, who's also been a guest on the podcast. Simon has 15 years experience training clients and has supervised over 15,000 high-intensity training workouts. Using knowledge from experts like Skylar Tanner, Dr. James Steele, Dr. Ellington Darden, HitUni is a goldmine for learning everything to do with high-intensity training. The courses are delivered online through the website, where you can learn via a variety of multimedia materials at your own pace. There's online support and a discussion forum where you can share ideas and ask for help. To learn more about high-intensity training and improve my own results, I started their personal trainer course. The content is amazing, the courses are really easy to follow, and each section is organized into bite-sized chunks that give you a real sense of achievement after you complete each one. I should also mention there is a DIY course, so this is the course for you if you're not necessarily a personal trainer, but you want to learn more about high-intensity training and how to implement it for maximum benefit in your own exercise regime. To get your exclusive Corporate Warrior 10% discount on any course you purchase, simply head on over to hituni.com, that's HITUNI.com, and enter the coupon code CW10, that's CW and the number 10. So again, head on over to hituni.com, pick your course, and enter the coupon code CW10 for 10% discount. Thank you for your support. This episode is brought to you by Health IQ, a life insurance company that helps health-conscious people like runners, cyclists, weightlifters, high-intensity training participants, and more get a low rate on their life insurance. Go to healthiq.com/CWarrior to support the show and see if you qualify. If you take care of yourself, you do smart strength training, you eat well, and your life insurance company doesn't seem like they care, there's an answer for you. Health IQ actually gives savings to people who take care of themselves. About 56% of Health IQ customers save between 4 and 33% on their life insurance because of this. Health IQ customers can save up to a third because physically active people have a 56% lower risk of heart disease, 20% lower risk of cancer, and 58% lower risk of diabetes compared to people that are inactive. But your life insurance company probably just doesn't care. You care, and there are companies out there that care. To see if you qualify, get your free quote today at healthiq.com/CWarrior or mention the promo code CWarrior when you talk to a Health IQ agent. Hi guys, I am Lawrence Neal and welcome to another episode of Corporate Warrior, the podcast that teaches you how to optimize your high-intensity training workouts and start and grow your high-intensity training business. My former guests include high-intensity training experts like Dr. Doug McGuff and Drew Bay, paleo pioneers Mark Sisson and Rob Wolf, zero-carb carnivore Dr. Sean Baker, successful strength training entrepreneurs like Luke Carlson and Roger Schwab, time management experts, HIT bodybuilders, New York Times best-selling authors, and everything in between. My next guest is mega entrepreneur James Schramko. James is the founder and CEO of business coaching service-based business, Super Fast Business, and Silver Circle. He's the author of the Amazon bestseller Work Less, Make More, which is an excellent read. I literally read this book in 2 days, and I'm excited to actually start implementing it into my own business. In his 8 years as a business coach, he's helped over 2,000 students create and maintain 6, 7, and even 8-figure businesses. 78.5% of his community make more than $100,000 per year. Members of James' select group, called Silver Circle, report multi-million-dollar gains within short periods of working with James. And his podcast, Super Fast Business, gets 65,000 listeners each month. It's an awesome podcast. James has a real way with in terms of coming across as a real kind of no-nonsense business expert, which I find very refreshing. In a sea of people who aren't always that trustworthy, I really do think that James is the real deal. When it comes to coaching people on how to build successful online businesses or just businesses in general, there really is no one else better qualified than James Schramko. If you have the money, I do think a business coach is an incredibly smart investment. I've recently invested in James's coaching myself because I felt like I needed someone to help keep me accountable and help guide me in building my own business. I've known about James for years, and he comes highly recommended by a number of friends who have worked with him in the past. In this interview, we cover why it took James 9 months to sell his first product online, how to find your converting offer, the importance of focusing on the customer, how to create a successful coaching forum. We talk about Pareto law 80-20 in terms of focusing on the 20% of stuff that gets 80% of the results. And James actually skews that even further to looking at the 4% that gets 64% of the results and how you can apply that to your selecting your products and services. We talk about productivity and doing the right things. His focusing on a single idea or project for 12 weeks. We talk about how to manage social media and try and curtail social media consumption, as that can be very bad for business. We talk about niche categories versus broad categories, the importance of using filters and working with the right types of people in your business. We talk about strategic partnerships and the importance of multiple traffic streams and the problems of relying on a single traffic source for your business, and much, much more. It's really important that although James isn't necessarily that involved, to my knowledge, in strength training business himself, he's a fantastic business mind and is proven on multiple domains. So everything he says on his podcast in terms of the principles do apply to strength training businesses. For all of the show notes and links for this episode and all episodes, please go to corporatewarrior.org where you'll find a full list. Don't forget to hang around in this episode for your free gift from me. And now, without further ado, I give you James Schramko. James, welcome to Corporate Warrior. Appreciate you coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
No worries. So kind of before we got started, I was talking about some of the points I really wanted to cover with you. And in preparation for this, I listened to a bunch of interviews you've done recently, which was really, really interesting to listen to and learn more about you. Obviously, I've known of you for a number of years via Siraj, which I mentioned earlier. When you first got into online business, you mentioned how you were kind of moonlighting and, working on the side whilst you were working for the likes of Mercedes-Benz. But it took you 9 months till you made your first online sale. I'd love to hear more you to elaborate on that, like why it took that long and what you felt was kind of wasting your time, or what activities were a waste of time during that period.
Well, the struggle was trying to find something to sell. I was confident that I could sell and I could manage business concepts. It was just really hard to take that to an online situation because by day I was a general manager, so I had staff and resource available to me. And at night, apart from being tired and having a fair bit of self-expectation, I didn't really know what to sell and I had no team, so I had to do everything myself. So I spent a lot of time, which I'd call wasted time now, doing things like learning how to build a website. I should have focused on the sales copy and just found that offer that converts as fast as possible. Because once you find something that you can sell that people will give you money for, then you can reinvest that money into building up websites. So in hindsight, it's a little bit too much time worrying about what font to use and which color panel to put on the side of the website. It's hard to say that I wish I didn't have that phase, because in that struggle is where I found my offer that converts, which was website building software. It took me a few years to migrate from building the websites to hiring people to do the website. And now, of course, more than a decade down the track, I don't touch my websites. There's no chance I'm going to be building a website. It's not my core area of specialty. Let's say that.
So yeah, I get what you're saying. So at the beginning, it's like, well, you don't necessarily have the income to outsource a lot of the activities that you wouldn't do today. So they're not really a waste of time. They're kind of a necessity at the beginning. How do you go about finding, or when you talk to your students, how do you advise them on finding that converting offer?
Interestingly, I don't chase students who don't have a converting offer, because that is by far the hardest part of the puzzle. If you can get the offer that converts, all the rest of it's easy. Getting an offer that converts is very hard. And so I actually filter out people who don't have an offer that converts. I don't necessarily want to work with them. And the saying that comes to mind is, you can't steer a parked car. I want to focus on helping people change from fourth gear to fifth gear and sixth gear, and how to use the accelerator and which line to take in the corners, that level of business. I don't want to explain to them, what an engine is and how to open the door for the car and let's adjust the seat. To me, that's a struggle. And you get to choose which customers you work with in what stage. So why not work with only the people who are going to bring out your best and you get excited about? So that's not helping you in terms of answering the question. But I would say if you're in a situation where you don't have an offer that converts, look to the market. We have to get off this idea of creating products and services and then trying to fit them to a customer. What we want is an audience. We want, as Gary Halbert would say, a starving crowd. And then we find out what their challenges are and problems are, as Ryan Levesque teaches in Ask. And then we create the solution, and hopefully they'll buy it. And a really good shortcut is to find out what people are already buying. If you can supply something that differentiates you, makes your supply better than other people's supply in some way other than price preferably, then you might be able to access that market fairly quickly and get a good response. And as you'd read about in books like The Lean Startup, you want to get to the market fairly early with your offer. Don't put too much time and effort into building it out. You don't need to go and rent a gym and get signage and T-shirts and hot air balloons to test an idea if that's going to work in your area. You might be able to get you might be able to start a gym in a park or something. Make sure you get all the appropriate permits. But if you could train people in the local park and you establish there's a market and you could get 5 or 6 of them or 10 of them or 20 of them, maybe then you go and lease an office or a corporate space. So you can start off small, or even better, go and visit other people's gyms and see how they do it, and if there are customers and if they are making a profit and what they like and what they don't like about it. And if you've then established that there's a market, you might be able to move into that space. And that's effectively what I did with my online business. I usually started with my customers' demand, and I saw what other people were doing and took my own approach to it. And my main thing now, which is a coaching community, was the result of me being a member of other people's communities and not finding a solution that was suitable for me. So I went and created my own. And after about 9 years, it's been since I started that community, it's remained very, very strong. So you see what other people are already buying is the secret, and focus on the customer, not your need to sell something.
That's wise words. So what makes your, and this is not me trying to give you an opportunity to plug, although it will be, because I'm just curious. Now, what does make your forum different then? What did you improve on the forum that you weren't happy with?
The thing that was difficult for me when I started, I didn't really have anyone to talk to or ask questions or get validation for my situation. There was lots of courses and pre-done training. And my biggest concern was, after I joined people's community, the founder would never show up. So the one thing that I do is turn up. I turn up for my students. I customize their programs for them. It's like having a gym where it's like a self-serve gym is what the market is offering. Like they just stick a routine on the wall and there's no one there to help, versus having a personal trainer who's there with you, helping you understand what the equipment is, what to eat, how to move, and the science behind it, and to track and measure your progress. So that's what I'm doing with my students. And I'm able to do it in a leveraged way because it's online. And I've had a few decades now of practice sort of hyper-threading multiple conversations in my mind and being able to keep context. But that's rare in my industry. Most people are trying to sell a course and not show up because they want that hammock lifestyle. And what I've done is find a way to put that into my daily routine without it being too much of a chore for me, but being tremendously valuable to the customer.
You talk about, you seem to be quite a big fan of Pareto law. I know you talk about it in your new book. Work less, earn more, earn more, work less. Is that the title again? Sorry, you have to correct me on the title.
Work less, make more.
Work less, make more. That's it. Apologies. But you skew that kind of Pareto law down further to 64-4, the 80-20 rule. And, I'm just interested to know, how you've kind of implemented that in your own business and in your own day to day. You just mentioned there that you've kind of like got to a point with your coaching where you can organize it and fit it into your day or into your week, without it being I guess a laborious activity for you. So can you just elaborate on that? And then I'd love to hear how you kind of actually plan your own day and your own week in your business and your life.
Well, one thing that's evident for me to have the products that do work well for me, I've been through several that over time I've removed. So if you have a lot of products or services, then you can apply that law and see which ones aren't very effective and remove them. So it might be like, we have a finite number of hours in the day. You hear a lot of people complaining there's not enough time. It's because they're trying to fit too much in, and usually that's because they're treating everything equally. But it really can apply to every area. Most of us, for example, I surf, and over time I've been able to work out which boards work well for me and which conditions, and then I can remove the rest. So my focus then is intense on the right ones. And it might be the same with a fitness routine.
Yeah. Were you surfing this morning?
Not yet, but I will afterwards. I wait till everyone goes to work.
He says smugly. Awesome. So, I mean, as I said before, I guess before we started, recording officially, a number of people that'll be listening to this are, in a career, like kind of 9 to 5 type of position, office job, who are interested in the idea of building something in their own time, like most people do, or most people have to start like that. I'd love to hear what your kind of thoughts are on productivity tips and tactics for those people, how they can get the most out of that time, when they're kind of starting out.
Well, it's quickly identify the things that are working. Like, it's all about doing the right things. So if getting an offer that converts is the right thing, you should focus on that. It's probably not about Facebook or Netflix in the beginning. They're luxuries that come later. So most people are wasting time on things that aren't going to have a good yield for them. Almost everyone, actually. It's at the point in society where it's pretty much a disease. You don't have to look far to see people on their phones all the time, and you'd have to think, what are they spending their time on? So if you wanted to go hardcore, and I imagine you've got some of those types of people in your programs with the name corporate warriors and high intensity, these are all pretty aggressive names. Take the app off your phone. That's a good starting point if you don't have the focus. And find the offers that convert and drill down into those, like make those perform and put the other things to the side for now. And one thing I talk about in my book is putting a 12-week buffer. So for that 12 weeks, you just have a specific objective, and that's the goal. It's as if you're going to run a marathon in 12 weeks from now. That's all you focus on. So if people want to take you off track and distract you, then you have to block them and review it at the 12-week point.
Yeah, that's good advice. And I think social media, obviously so much money is invested in making it so addictive. The best engineers are behind trying to keep you on there as long as possible, that it can be incredibly time consuming. And I think I trick myself a lot thinking I'm being productive because I'm on social media, looking at my business content, but really I'm just looking at what the response is. I'm just getting that kind of dopamine response to the number of likes on my latest post or podcast, and I'm curious, is that something that you've like disciplined yourself not to check because you realize that it's, unproductive and at the worst quite harmful?
Yeah, well, I don't run my Facebook page. My team does that. They're loading up the content and they're checking the results, and they can report that to me in Slack. So it's totally about discipline and an awareness of what an energy suck that can be. And the more we learn about ourselves, the more effective we can be. You're right. It is that dopamine release. It's some engineer in Facebook it's their job to get you on that platform as much as possible. They're cleaning it out constantly, trying to tune the algorithm to make it more appealing for you. In the same way that Google did when they dominated the search engines, they removed all the crappy sites to make the results better so they can get more advertising revenue and have more people hooked onto it. So it's the reason I mentioned that one. It's just such an easy win, is to curtail your social media activity per day. Most average people are going to find 8 hours a week easily just doing that. Doesn't mean you have to stay off it or give it up. Just use it from a desktop instead of your phone, or limit yourself to half an hour a day. So I still use some social media, but in the grand scheme of marketing channels, social media is probably more effective with groups or paid type campaigns, and it should only be a portion of your traffic, not all of it. So even if it is producing all your traffic, you'd have to say every extra hour you spend on there might start to diminish the power of it.
Yeah, no, I'd have to agree with that. I'm really curious about this. Like, I'm going to kind of move on to, I guess, another kind of business section here. But I'm curious about the idea of the law of category. Tim Ferriss often talks about 22 immutable laws of marketing and the law of category. And this is, I guess, I'm asking this question more from a personal perspective, but I think it might be helpful for the listeners as well. In terms of choosing categories and niches, I've heard you talk about before, you pick and correct me if I'm wrong in misinterpreting you on this, but you pick a category, and chances are if you're going into an existing category or niche, there's the big boys at the top, and then the rest of us kind of fighting for the scraps. And in truth, I sometimes feel like I'm doing that in my podcast. I've kind of in the kind of productivity niche, it's health, business, time optimization, but it's productivity. And I'm probably, one of several podcasts that look at that. Although I seem to have really hit it off in the high intensity training space, which is certainly where I've captured a lot of my listeners. But I'd love to hear how you think about stuff like that. Like, do you think it's really important for new business owners to try and find a new category or new niche, or do you think that one can enter an existing niche and just be as successful? Like, how do you think about stuff like that, if you even do? Just curious.
I'd say I've been more of a generalist. So it's funny, I'm not really known for one particular niched thing. So I'm not obsessed about niching. I'm more interested in serving a market. And it turns out that my skills suit being general. So I used to be a general manager. I have a good working knowledge of most things in my market, and I have a fantastic roll call of contacts, and the problems that I'm solving for people at the level that I'm solving it at, they're not niched problems. They can be anywhere. Like even just to catch all of the sort of things that we talk about in a single session of several group owners could span amazingly different topics. So it hasn't been something I've done since the beginning. At the very beginning, I was niched into the website software that could only work on Windows, that would help you build a website. And that was a specific market, but I actually maxed it out. I was probably in the top 1 or 2 affiliates in the entire world for that product. And it was sort of maxed out at about 10 grand a month. So there wasn't that run. I'm not going to be Elon Musk with something like that. So I think people probably overemphasize this niching thing. I think it's more important to tune into your audience and to grow with them. So if you look at even my own community over the last 9 years, the audience has grown up and matured and become more successful as we've gone from building websites to how to add recurring programs to our business. Those sort of big changes. We sort of zoom out, if you like, instead of zooming in. And you can hire specialists if you're a generalist. It is harder probably to bring in a generalist. That's why I think it's actually become my niche. So it's kind of ironic in a way. I hope some of that helps.
No, it does. It's just, I love hearing how different people think about this stuff. And that was quite certainly from, what I'm normally exposed to, that sounds like quite a contrarian view on niches in a way. But I guess you are in a niche in that you are coaching a certain level of business person. And that is, I don't know how, that is a niche in its own right, I suppose. But I suppose it would be not true to say that you dominate that niche, since I imagine there's quite a lot of coaches out there.
It's an interesting one. I coach quite a few of the experts, and I don't make a big public deal out of it. So I often don't get credit for some of the people that I'm working with because we just keep it quiet, and that's okay. I'm all right with that. And the next level above that, I'm a very silent partner in some businesses where I get a small percentage of revenue, and that's totally cool. So yeah, within that certain field, I'd be one of the few people on a short list of people who they'll be referred to. Almost all my business will come via referrals. So that's another interesting thing there. If your product's very good, you'll have no issue with traffic or conversions. It's just a matter of your capacity then, how much you can actually take on. And quite comfortable in that role. So I haven't, until the book, I haven't really come out to the public with all these ideas. So now I'm going more general. If anything, with the book, like Work Less, Make More, I'm becoming more mass market, more general. I could appeal to anyone from a student through to an employee through to someone with their own business with a book like that. And that's really helping the lower part of my business, where I'm dealing with people at an earlier stage. And I suspect over time it will mature and grow people into perfect customers if they apply the book.
And perfect customers being those that you kind of hinted at the beginning, those that know how to drive, like who are at that kind of more mature stage in their business.
Yeah, so I wouldn't call that a niche. I'd call that a filter. Some people work in verticals where they serve a specific industry. They could be the go-to guy for a specific, like cross training or something, or high intensity training. Then there's other filters like horizontals, which is the one that I'm using, which is I would like to see someone when they're already making at least $10,000 a year with whatever business they want help with. And that's basically, they've got in the car, they've started it, and they've pulled out of the curb, and they're actually driving along the street. They're at that point, and then I can say, like, let me show you how this thing works. And that's more exciting for me. And there's a high-level program where I have a minimum filter of $200,000. I'm just using US dollars as a reference, just in case.
Most of my listeners are actually US, so that's absolutely fine.
Yeah, it's just it's a global, understandable currency. So, yeah, so that's just setting filters, because it's very important to not work with people who are not an ideal fit, because it'll be frustrating for them, it'll be frustrating for you, and you have a finite capacity. There's no shortage of prospects for me of people who are making more than $10,000 in business, and there's plenty of people who aren't, and I feel for them because I've been there, but that's not my market, and I'm clear on that. And knowing where you draw the line is very healthy for you, because you don't waste any energy or effort. I could burn all my brain cells on trying to get someone to make their first $100, and it would be 10 times more difficult than helping someone go from $100,000 a year to $500,000 a year.
Yeah, I totally get that, and I appreciate why you focus on that. On that type of individual. Are you a fan of the idea of? So I've had this concept introduced to me called strategic partnerships. Whenever I've thought about creating a course or ebook or product or service of some kind, I always kind of got concerned that it would detract away from my content creation, which is the bit I love the most, writing high quality blog posts or recording podcasts. And, recently I've kind of gone into partnership with someone to produce content, produce products for my audience. And I just wondered, do you have a view on that type of strategy? Is that proven to work well in your experience?
Strategic partnerships and alliances are very powerful if they're done well. There's obvious upsides and obvious downsides. So an obvious upside is you don't have to do the stuff, and you can focus on other things. I'd question if content is the most important thing, because generally I would call content a traffic and conversion tool, and then creating the products is the delivery tool. So as a business expert, there might be some element of delivery that you could be involved in that is high value. So most of my activities are creating core content and delivering on the product. The obvious downside is that you sometimes lose a bit of control, and you definitely have to pay, unless it's a pay on performance type thing. But at some point, there will be a cost. What I call partner tax. And you see this classic scenario, like let's say like a band. There might be 5 guys in the band and they get $100 for the gig. Now they get $20 each. So automatically, by having partners, it reduces your potential profit. So you want to make sure that if you have a partner, they're doing something you wouldn't or shouldn't or can't do yourself. And it does make sense to bring in people who are very good at something. So partnerships are quite difficult and have occasionally can end up in meltdown. One of my mentors said partnerships become sinking ships, and I'm fairly cautious about partnerships. But as I mentioned before, I do have some deals where I'm a silent partner and I do my things and I generate a royalty from that. So they've worked really well for me, and I've also seen the dark side of it. I think the trap to avoid, and I see this one a lot, is people are too quick to partner, especially in the beginning, because they're very excited and they love the idea of collaboration. And it's a lonely business, this online stuff, especially where I'm involved in. People want to buddy up with someone and have someone give them cuddles and reassurance and hope secretly the other person will do all the work and they're going to ride the coattails. Those things don't work because you automatically from the beginning you're now taking half instead of the whole profit. You find out your partner won't do all the work for nothing, and if they do, they're not going to put up with it for very long. It's very easy to give away money you don't have. As soon as the thing becomes successful, that becomes more and more difficult. People over time tend to go down different paths. Some people have families or want to travel. Other people want to just stay still. And as the partners diverge, and unless it's totally in balance, it will bust up at some point. So there's very few successful partnerships at the top of the heap, and there's plenty along the roadside along the way. So if you find a strategic alliance that works well and they're complementing something you don't want to do or you're not that good at, then by all means go for it. But continually assess what options are available to you and make sure that the deal's still working. And always make sure that the contract or the agreement is extremely clear up front on how the partnership might end. Don't go into a partnership unless you know how it will finish or could finish, what options you have. That's the most important part.
And now it's time for a quick break. This episode is brought to you by Health IQ, a life insurance company that helps health-conscious people like runners, cyclists, weightlifters, high-intensity training participants, and more get a lower rate on their life insurance. Go to healthiq.com/cwarrior to support the show and see if you qualify. If you take care of yourself, you do smart strength training, you eat well, and your life insurance company doesn't seem like they care, there's an answer for you. Health IQ actually gives savings to people who take care of themselves. About 56% of Health IQ customers save between 4 and 33% on their life insurance because of this. To see if you qualify, get your free quote today at healthiq.com/cwarrior or mention a promo code CWarrior when you talk to a Health IQ agent. And now back to the show. You mentioned earlier about, I was talking about, I like to focus on the content, and allying with someone to help with creating good products is appealing to me. But then you mentioned, well, you don't necessarily think that actually content is that important to focus on. And sorry if I took that out of context, but I'm just trying to remember exactly what you said. One of the ways this podcast generates revenue is through sponsors. So in a way, like the content is the product, and then obviously sponsors are bringing in the revenue. So is that something that you advocate? Or I noticed I don't think you have sponsors on your podcast. So are you not a fan personally of having sponsored content?
Yeah, I don't have sponsored content because effectively I sponsor myself.
Yeah.
The purpose of my podcast is to drive membership sales and event sales and masterminds, and to attract partners for my high-level sort of scenario, and lately, book sales, which is a surprise. I didn't realize you can actually make money with a book. It wasn't an expectation, but they do actually pay you, Amazon, so that's nice. If your podcast is getting sponsorship ads and that's a business model in itself, then sure, you are already working on the delivery of the product. So it depends how much that makes for you and if that's the end game or if it's just a pathway. And I expect that it would be good supplemental income, but there must be more income to be able to get from doing things like having subscriptions and courses in a market like yours. There'd be certainly people who have financial capacity and a desire to make change who would take that to the next stage. As a rule of thumb, it's probably 10% of your audience would be willing to pay 10 times more for something if you could supply it.
Interesting. Your podcast has been, when have you been going? Since 2004, was it you started? Something like that. Is that correct?
Not quite that long. I registered my first domain in 2005, but I really began in earnest in 2006 was my struggle year. And podcasting, I've probably been doing that for a while. The first time I went onto iTunes was with this podcast called Freedom Ocean. And before that, I was recording audio but not putting it onto iTunes. So I've retrocasted that once I realized how it works. So I went and actually uploaded my all of my audios to iTunes by submitting it, and it retrocasted everything. There's quite a lot of episodes on my site now. But recording audio is something I've been doing for almost 10 years.
Yeah.
June 2009 was my first one.
Oh, wow. What, podcasting's really started to take off now, it would seem. Have you seen, I'm just curious, have you seen since it's really started getting popular and I guess the technology's made it a lot more accessible, have you seen kind of like a big hockey stick in terms of the growth of your own podcast and the downloads? Or have you seen that type of reaction?
No, there's a lot more people in the market now than when I started. So,
right.
I used to dominate the top charts in Australia at least, and now there's a flood of podcasts. So I would say for me, it's been extremely consistent. Almost similar numbers. There's a few more tools these days to help people stay subscribed. I've got my own app. We've got things like that, Push Crew and tools that will notify people when there's a new episode. And I've got quite a few people subscribing to it, and Apple have finally released stats on that, which I've just been exploring in the last week.
What do you think?
Because they never published that sort of information. Well, I think anything that shows you what, it's like mapping the ocean floor. We didn't know what it was, and now we're getting an idea. So I think it's great. And it's for me, it's been a part of my marketing. It's a strong part of my marketing, but it's not all of my marketing. And that's been the secret to survival for the time that I've been online. Is I've never been overcooking one particular source where it's going to expose me if it breaks. Yeah. And I've broken lots of different sources over time. I've had, when I was an affiliate and promoting some products, at times the companies don't like it. I think Amazon, Google, and Facebook and YouTube have all banned my account at some point for reasons I'm not even sure of, and then mysteriously gave them back to me. So it must have been too bad, but years later. But luckily I wasn't relying on those. And right now you'll see a lot of people complaining about Facebook making changes because they're overly dependent on that traffic source. And it's just such a classic mistake that people make over and over again.
It's really interesting what you said earlier about the fact that the podcast market is now more busy. And I almost expect you to say, yeah, you know what, downloads have really dropped since everyone started entering this market, but sounds like it's still doing fairly well. But it's funny because you're obviously hearing the opposite from a lot of people who are just starting podcasts, who are trying to obviously get a piece of that growing pie. Do you agree with the notion that, the podcast market has still got a long way to go until it's like, the kind of audience is at full capacity?
I do, because they're incorporated into vehicles, and as people upgrade, it'll become more accessible. And we're all putting home pods and Google Homes in our space where we live, where we've got voice command. See, things like voice command will assist that, and AI, because we're using these assistants and we can tell it to get a podcast and we listen to it. We're not listening to free media anymore. I don't know if you've ever listened to a free radio station, not something quality like you probably have in the UK, but commercial radio here. I'd rather have a lobotomy than listen to commercial radio here. They have like the dumbest DJs on the planet with the most inane thing. I accidentally caught a conversation where they were trying to survey their audience on how men go to the toilet, if they open the top of their fly or the button, or just do the zip and whip it out. I'm like, really? So that will force people to podcasts. But I did notice a huge change when iPhones became more widespread. When everyone got these portable devices, it's put the media into the hands of the audience. So that's the big change I've seen over a decade. Is it's easier to create media. Almost everyone's got a good quality microphone now in my market. We have the ability to edit to a reasonable level and have professional sounding intros and outros. Like us, we have the same tools or better tools than what radio stations had 15 or 20 years ago. We have really accessible media production and accessible media consumption. So that just means it will tip in favor of the better operators. The ones who are very good will dominate. There'll be a massive learning curve for people starting podcasting now in a fairly busy market. It's definitely going to be competitive, so you will have to have a different angle on it. And I've tried a few different podcasts. I've had about 5, and some of them were very successful. But the hardest part, coming back to an old thread here, is the partners. In my space, getting an entrepreneur on the other side of a microphone can be challenging, especially the more successful they get. So I partnered with pretty successful marketers on at least 2 of my podcasts where they've just become too busy and too big for the podcast. So it was really interesting to watch that life cycle. Like, for example, one of my co-hosts went from making maybe a couple of $100,000 a year when I started coaching him to just under $30 million a year now. Wow. Over the last 5 years or so. So that gives you a pretty good window into the potential growth and change that things like podcasts can assist with. And if you combine in video, Facebook marketing and email database marketing and good product, then all these things stack on top of each other to have a big growth curve.
Do you get a lot of people come to you asking how to start a podcast?
I've published how to start a podcast. I did a great article on Noah Kagan's
yes, I've read
blog.
That.
And I've published a similar version on my own thing, and I've definitely published quite a lot about it inside my community. And of course, I answer people's personal questions. And we have a podcast starter discussion where when people create their podcast, they can update it, and all of our members can then go and access it and give it a boost with the first downloads and to go and review it. Genuinely, it's not like just a passing comment. It's like we have a pretty engaged community of people who have podcasts, so it's a strong pack, if you like. So it's a topic that comes up a lot. It's one of my absolute favorite mediums because it's very easy to do, and it is like I'd rather talk than type. So it suits the way that I want to present information. I'm a big Tim Ferriss fan, as you've probably gathered already. I'm sure you probably have consumed some of his content. He's I remember him recently saying that, if he was starting again, he may start a podcast as a business. He's kind of popular for saying that if you decide to monetize a podcast and get sponsors, then really you want to be in the region of 100K downloads per episode in that 6-week post-production period, which from my perspective, that seems a bit unrealistic for like 90% of people who start podcasts, regardless of how niche they are. I'd just be interested, what is your opinion on that as a business strategy, as a business model for most people? Yeah, he's probably not far off. If you want to dominate the charts, you would need that sort of number of downloads. And if you're making a podcast a business, you're essentially being a private radio station.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of competition now compared to before. Like before was the Wild West, and now it's like the real deal. So you'd have to bring some level of expertise. Think about how many books he's published and how popular he is. If you want to be in the same market as him, you're going to have to do something pretty special. It's like when I published my book was sitting next to Ray Dalio's book, who's like the top hedge fund investor in the world, Timothy Ferriss's book, who sold God knows how many books, and Richard Branson's new book. So I can access the exact same platform and media as Richard Branson, Tim Ferriss, and Ray Dalio. The thing is, they have this strong connection, and how much publicity has Branson done? Like he's been doing publicity for decades and invested enormous amounts of funds into becoming known. And some guy in board shorts and bare feet in Manly is in the same, on the same bookstore right next to him on the virtual shelf. Going to have to put a bit of effort and have a good strategy if you want to stay at the top. So I think he's probably not miles wrong. You definitely need thousands and thousands of downloads per episode to have some traction. But anecdotally, from my own business, if you can get 2,000 or 3,000 downloads from very relevant subscribers and you've got something to sell, then you probably find a greater income will come from having products and services rather than just advertising on the podcast itself.
Yeah, that's certainly an approach I probably will be taking going forward. And congratulations on getting your book so well noticed, among that those guys. That's pretty impressive. And, I'm looking forward to downloading it myself and reading it, as I'm sure I'll learn a lot. James, I know you've got to probably wrap up very shortly. Have you got time for a couple more rapid fire questions, or do you need to shoot?
Yeah, no, you go for it.
Cool. What does the first 90 minutes of your day look like?
It's water, some supplements, a coffee, and oats, a cup of oats, which is something I do to build up my stomach, probiotics. A friend of mine's helped me with that. And then it's check surf conditions. So I'd either surf at that point or check. I'll just scan what's happened. Like, I like to actually see the news, see what's happening there, and it already scans on my phone. I don't have to even unlock it. I can just see it, and then I might check emails. But at the moment, I'm likely to be doing a school run because school's back, and I've still got one kid at school age, and we're waiting on a bus pass to arrive. So that's an unusual change to the routine. But generally, I'll stage my day. I like to think of it as an on-ramp. That sort of routine gets me a very consistent result. And if I surf every day, I'm paddling something like between 3.5 and 5 kilometers every day when I surf. So that gives me a good physical workout. And I'm only mentioning that because of the type of podcast that you've got here. I thought it might be more interesting for you. And it's also a walk. It's a short walk just down a hill and back up a hill. So it's an excellent daily workout with lots of different movements, and it's always different conditions. So it's not monotonous or boring like going to a gym staring at an iron bar, which I couldn't do. I tried it for a week, first time after a couple of decades, and it's like, nah, there's no way. Just shoot me. So, there's that. And because I live in a very active, beachy, lifestyle-y, good weather all year type environment, doing a fair bit of walking and thinking, and I watch Netflix or I usually watch a movie every day or something, because I'm learning more about storytelling and things, like some things, like whether it's Vikings or Game of Thrones, although they're kind of interesting and you learn stuff, and it's entertaining and interesting. And I read a fair bit. I don't really listen to podcasts, which is interesting. And of course, I log in and answer questions for my customers every day in my own community. But I can do that from a phone, from my own app. So I could be in a car at the beach, or I could be at the shops. I like to be counter-cyclical as well. So generally try and do activities that might otherwise be busy while everyone's at work or school. So if I leave home, it'll be during the middle of the day. I'll go to the movies or shop or something while the others are busy, and then and surf. And then when they get back and flood it, like weekends are just the time everyone's consuming my space. So I'm more likely to be doing something else.
Yeah, I remember that I remember Dan Kennedy, I think, called it live off peak. I remember reading one of his books years ago on that, being more efficient by going to all of the, doing the posting stuff and doing your food shop in the off-peak periods, which is exactly what I do as well. So, yeah, no, it's that's definitely one of the advantages to because running an online business and being able to kind of choose your hours. So, I mean, you touched on a few things that you're focused on. What's your kind of current mission? What do what's your big goals for 2018?
Well, I've got to read my book to make the Audible version, and I've got some notes for another book. Quite liked the process of doing a book, but most importantly, I just want to surf every day. I'm looking forward to my Maldives trip in September, and I've got a little bit of light travel. I may find my way to I'm going to America in a week or two from now, and then I'm heading over to Europe in the middle of the year. So I've got 3 main travel things pegged. I'll surf every day in the meantime, and just basically business as usual. It's a very simple life, actually. I like my routine. I'm happy with how it works, happy with everything except the quality of internet connection I'm able to get in Sydney, which is disappointing, but it will improve eventually, probably another year or two.
Do you have Ethernet coming in at the moment, or is that what you're hoping they provide some kind of?
There is a big rollout, but there's it comes near me, but not at me, and we have old lines, and our problem is we have a big country and not many people, so the infrastructure is horrendous compared to heavily populated countries.
Have you considered
where
moving?
They can justify it?
Yeah, sorry.
No, I've just moved recently.
Oh
so
yeah, of course.
I've gone out of the fire pan into the fire. Like, I had very fast internet before, and now I've got very slow internet. So that's annoying, but I am spending a lot less time on the computer, so it hasn't been the end of the world.
Awesome. Final question for you, James, and then I'll wrap up and get your contact details, etc. What is the best business book you've read in recent memory?
Probably Ray Dalio's Principles. I really relate to a lot of what he talked about because I was learning about Forex last year, so I had a lot of context, and then his idea of principles and algorithms or models, whatever word you want to use for that, it's very much the way that I think. So I liked that book.
Awesome. And what is some bad advice you hear in the world often in terms of business? Sorry, bad business advice.
There's a lot of it. Well, ascension model, this idea that you should start something for free and then $7 and then $99 and then $1,000 and then $10,000. It's just not how people buy. That's assuming everyone that comes to you is not in the buying window and at the lowest level. So it's daft. What else? Oh, just take action. That's a classic. I mean, think about this. You got some skinny guy in the gym and you're saying, just take action. If it's one wrong move, he's going to throw his back out and be out of the gym for however many months, needing muscle repair. So it's more about taking the right action. If you could only just take a few right actions, you wouldn't have to worry about a lot of the other actions. And that's really what the 80-20 is about. So that one always surprises me that people are so avid about action, but taking wrong actions just defeats you faster and can damage you.
Yeah, I agree, and I can tell you're fairly passionate about that for good reason. I've also really appreciated, by the way, how you've constantly tied your points back to kind of a fitness relevancy, which is really indicative of how thoughtful you are about the audience you're addressing when you create content. For those that are listening, James asked me about the audience, prior to recording, and I just think that's a real key takeaway in itself. It's very meta, but I feel it's a real key takeaway for those that are running a business or starting a business that are listening to this, who may need to always think about their audience when creating anything. James, what's the best way for people to find out more about you? And I guess how can people find your book as well, in addition to that, and you'll find out about your coaching community?
You'll find most of this at superfastbusiness.com. And that is, there's a link to the book. You can find the book on Amazon. I know it's on the Amazon and in most major markets. And I know that because they send me checks with pounds. I have to convert them.
It's a tough life.
When I go. It is, I'd hate to think how much I've paid in conversion fees, especially because America have an obsession with checks. And for the last decade, I've been converting checks from places like ClickBank or whatever. Frightening, but it's actually fine. It's a good inconvenience. The superfastbusiness.com has podcasts, so lots of free stuff, and there's also information about which is the most suitable level of stuff. And if you're not ready yet, that's totally cool. I'm not disparaging anyone who's not yet making $10,000. I think the book will help you make your $10,000. Once you've done that, then there's next level stuff that I can help with.
Awesome. And for everyone listening, to find the blog post for this episode, go to corporatewarrior.co/James. And until next time, guys, thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed that episode. Before you head off, head on over to corpwarrior.com, that's CORP warrior.com, to get your free high-intensity training Google Progress chart, an ebook with 6 interview transcripts of some of my top guests, including Dr. Doug McGuff, Drew Bay, and Bill Simone, on how to optimize muscle gain, fat loss, and overall health in an efficient, effective, and sustainable way. These transcripts are deliberately not verbatim. Instead, they've been transcribed in an easy read format to make it more enjoyable and easier for you to quickly pick out what you need and start getting results. To get your ebook, head on over to corpwarrior.com, enter your email address, then check your email for an email from me with a confirmation link. Once you click the link, you will be instantly redirected to a PDF version of the transcripts. This podcast is brought to you by HitUni.com. HitUni.com are a provider of amazing online courses for high-intensity training qualifications. HitUni comes highly recommended by the best in the field, including Body by Science co-author Dr. Doug McGuff, Discover Strength CEO Luke Carlson, and trainer and founder of Bay.com, Drew Bay. It was founded by my friend, author, and longtime personal trainer Simon Shawcross, who's also been a guest on the podcast. Simon has 15 years experience training clients and has supervised over 15,000 high-intensity training workouts. Using knowledge from experts like Skylar Tanner, Dr. James Steele, Dr. Ellington Darden, HitUni is a goldmine for learning everything to do with high-intensity training. The courses are delivered online through the website, where you can learn via a variety of multimedia materials at your own pace. There's online support and a discussion forum where you can share ideas and ask for help. To learn more about high-intensity training and improve my own results, I started their personal trainer course. The content is amazing, the courses are really easy to follow, and each section is organized into bite-sized chunks that give you a real sense of achievement after you complete each one. I should also mention there is a DIY course, so this is the course for you if you're not necessarily a personal trainer, but you want to learn more about high-intensity training and how to implement it for maximum benefit in your own exercise regime. To get your exclusive Corporate Warrior 10% discount on any course you purchase, simply head on over to hituni.com, that's HITUNI.com, and enter the coupon code CW10, that's CW and the number 10. So again, head on over to hituni.com, pick your course, and enter the coupon code CW10 for 10% discount. Thank you for your support.